Hi guys, and welcome to Last Light Radio channel. Tonight we step into the uneasy hush of 1855, where a nation speaks grandly about liberty, while millions live with chains, threats, bargains, and fragile hopes. You move through pre-dawn streets and muddy lanes where every sound matters, every knock at a door can change a life, and every sunrise asks the same hard question. What does freedom mean when the law keeps changing its mind? You can almost feel the cool air on your skin, smell damp wood smoke drifting over cramped homes, and hear wagon wheels muttering over rough ground while the country sleepwalks toward a reckoning. So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, and while you're here, comment with your location and your local time. Now, dim the lights, and let the darkness soften around you as you enter a black American morning in 1855. You wake before full light, because many people do. The day begins early when labour owns the clock. In a slave cabin on a southern plantation, the air is close and still. The floor feels cool under bare feet. Ash from last night's fire carries a faint sour smell, mixed with cornmeal, wool, and damp timber. Someone nearby clears a throat. A baby stirs. Outside, the first rooster calls with the confidence of a tiny feathered tyrant, as if he personally invented the sunrise. You rise carefully in a room crowded by need. The cabin is simple, often built fast and cheaply, with rough boards, gaps in the walls, and little protection from winter or heavy rain. Many enslaved families sleep several to a bed, or on pallets made from straw, cloth, and whatever can be saved. Privacy is almost a fantasy. Comfort is a visitor who rarely stays long, yet within this cramped space, people still shape a life. A folded scrap of cloth is kept clean for Sunday, a cherished spoon is stored in a crack near the wall, a quilt, pieced together from worn fabric, carries more dignity than many grand speeches. On some plantations, the enslaved receive weekly rations of cornmeal, salt pork, or bacon. Sometimes there are sweet potatoes, sometimes fish, sometimes less than promised, because promises in such places are soft things. Gardens can help when permitted. Chickens may be raised quietly if the rules bend enough. In some areas, hunting, fishing, or trapping fill dangerous gaps in diet. Historians still argue how much autonomy enslaved people could wrest from these small patches of food production, because conditions differed sharply from one plantation to another. But one thing is plain. Hunger was never far away. You step outside and see the horizon slowly silvering. The yard holds the smell of wet earth and animal pens. A cart creaks, harness leather groans. The larger house stands at a distance, sometimes elegant, sometimes plain, but always loaded with power. There may be a driver already moving through the quarters. There may be an overseer on horseback, wrapped in that peculiar form of authority that depends completely on being obeyed by people he has no moral right to command. If you're enslaved in 1855, your day depends on the crop, the season, and the whims of ownership. In the deep south, cotton dominates vast regions. In tobacco areas, the rhythm differs. In rice districts, labour can be especially punishing, with standing water, insects, and disease making each task heavier. Sugar plantations are notorious for brutal work, and even mild descriptions of them sound exhausting. The body is measured by output. Childhood can end almost as soon as strength appears in the arms. But 1855 is not only plantation land. You can also wake in a southern town where free black families live in narrow legal and social space. Freedom exists on paper, yet paper can burn, be stolen, or be ignored by men with badges, guns, or creative definitions of ownership. You may keep your free papers folded carefully in a pocket or sewn into clothing. You may know exactly where they are even in the dark. Losing them is not a small inconvenience. It is a nightmare with legal language. In some cities, free black artisans work as carpenters, barbers, caulkers, blacksmiths, seamstresses, washerwomen, or boatmen. Their work is skilled, necessary, and rarely rewarded with the respect it deserves. White employers may praise craftsmanship one minute and deny equal treatment the next. Still, black communities build lives in these places through churches, mutual aid, family networks, and extraordinary caution. A wrong word to the wrong person can invite harassment. A rumour can bring police. A debt can become a trap. Move north, and the morning changes but does not become innocent in Philadelphia, New York, Boston, or smaller northern towns. Free black Americans rise in rented rooms, alley houses, boarding homes, and crowded neighbourhoods near docks or workshops. The bedding may be cleaner, the roof stronger, the street busier, but insecurity remains. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 hangs over daily life like bad weather that never quite passes. Slave catchers and kidnappers can seize people claimed as fugitives, sometimes with flimsy evidence and great confidence. Black communities know this. They organise watches, warn neighbours, and guard one another with anxious devotion. So even in places without slavery, morning can begin with checking the street before opening the door. You wash in cold water from a basin, your hands sting awake. Somewhere bread bakes, somewhere sewage rots in a gutter. Cities in 1855 are full of opposites. Fresh coffee and horse manure, soap and coal smoke, church bells and dockside shouting, respectability and danger side by side like reluctant roommates. For black women, whether enslaved or free, the burdens of the day are often doubled. Labour outside the home and labour within it blend into one long demand. On plantations, women may work in the fields, then cook, mend, wash, and care for children after sundown. In towns and cities, many free black women earn money through domestic service, laundering, sewing, market work, or taking in boarders. Their work supports households and extends the survival of communities. It is skilled work, physical work, and often invisible in official records, because archives have a habit of admiring powerful men while ignoring the people who actually kept everyone alive. Children wake too. That may sound obvious. But in 1855, childhood is shaped quickly by adult fear. In slavery, children can be assigned tasks young, carrying water, minding infants, sweeping yards, shoeing livestock, gathering fuel, or learning the routines of larger labour. Games still exist. Laughter still breaks out. Children will be children even under systems built to crush them, which feels almost miraculous. They make toys from scraps, carve little objects, sing, race, tease, and invent worlds from almost nothing. A stick becomes a horse, a rag becomes a doll, a patch of dirt becomes a kingdom no law can quite enter. One quirky detail from the period comes from hair care and personal style. Even under severe hardship, black Americans maintained grooming traditions with remarkable creativity. Combs, head wraps, oils, scarves, and careful styling all mattered. Head wraps could be practical, beautiful, and socially meaningful at once. In cities, barbershops run by black men sometimes became places of conversation, business, and observation. A barber heard everything: politics, gossip, trade, vanity, scandal. If walls could talk, barbershop walls would never stop. As the sky brightens, religion may already shape the household mood. A whispered prayer before work, a hymn hummed low, a Bible passage remembered by heart because reading it directly may be forbidden or risky. Christianity among black Americans in 1855 is deeply important, but never simple. Some enslavers encourage a version of religion focused on obedience. Enslaved and free, black believers often claim that faith in their own way, emphasizing deliverance, justice, and human worth. The same book is read through very different eyes. One side finds control, the other finds hope. There is still scholarly debate over exactly how much African spiritual practice remained visible in different regions by the mid-19th century, especially in music, burial customs, healing practices, and patterns of worship. But traces endure, sometimes openly, sometimes folded into Christian forms, like a second melody beneath the first. Culture survives by changing shape. That is one of history's quietest and strongest truths. Now the sun rises fully, and work begins in earnest. In the countryside, the soundscape sharpens. Hoes strike soil, oxen snort. Insects start their endless fiddling. Orders are shouted across rows. The smell of crushed plants rises under the heat. Cotton work means endless bending, lifting, pulling, carrying. Tobacco demands careful handling. Rice labour means wet feet, aching backs, and mosquitoes with the manners of tiny vampires. The joke writes itself, though the people living it were granted very little comedy. Some enslaved labourers work as house servants, cooks, drivers, nurses, gardeners, stable hands, carpenters, or blacksmiths. These roles can bring marginally better food or clothing, and sometimes greater movement. They can also bring constant surveillance and sharper emotional strain. A house servant may stand close enough to hear private conversations, witness tenderness given to pets but not to people, and move through rooms filled with objects more protected by law than they are. It is an education in hypocrisy. In urban settings, a free black labourer might head toward the docks, where work is heavy and irregular. Ships bring goods, news, disease, sailors, arguments, and possibility. Along the waterfront, the smell is unforgettable. Salt, tar, fish, mud, sweat, tobacco, wet rope, and wood. The dockside world is rough, multilingual, and full of movement. It is also one place where information travels fast. News can arrive in a sailor's pocket before it reaches a newspaper office. Political rumours travel with cargo, so do opportunities, so do lies. A school teacher, if she is fortunate enough to teach, may prepare a room with slates, benches, and precious books. Education for black Americans in 1855 is desired passionately and obstructed constantly. In some southern states, teaching enslaved people to read is illegal or tightly suppressed, especially after earlier rebellions frightened white authorities. Fearful societies often become obsessive about alphabets. They sense, correctly, that literacy opens doors no chain can fully close. Even where black schooling is legal, resources are scarce, buildings are small, supplies are poor. White opponents may ridicule or attack schools, yet families save, sacrifice, and organize for education. Reading is practical, spiritual, and political. It helps you keep accounts, read scripture, follow anti-slavery arguments, write letters, and understand the world trying so hard to misunderstand you. By mid-morning, the body settles into routine. Though routine never means ease, meals are brief, instructions are constant, time is watched from above. On a plantation, the threat of punishment structures the day, even when punishment is not visible that moment. In free communities, the threat is different but still real. Job loss, eviction, police scrutiny, racial insult, fraud, kidnapping. The legal status of freedom does not guarantee restful breathing, and yet, remarkably, there is still style, humour, flirtation, pride, and ceremony. People joke at the edge of hardship. They tease one another. They sing while working, not because suffering is romantic, but because rhythm helps bodies endure. Some songs carry layered meanings. A tune may sound cheerful to one listener and carry warning, memory, or longing to another. Scholars disagree on how often particular spirituals encoded escape directions in literal ways, but there is no doubt that music preserved emotion, identity, and collective strength. You begin to understand something important about 1855. Black life is not defined only by oppression, though oppression shapes nearly everything around it. It is also defined by choice within limits, care within danger, intelligence under pressure, and beauty made from materials the wider society considered disposable. A neatly swept floor, a pressed collar, a child's lesson repeated from memory, a pot seasoned well, a hymn held steady. These are not tiny things, they are human declarations. As noon approaches, heat gathers over fields and streets alike. Dust clings to skin, the sun presses down on hats, head wraps, and bare heads with equal indifference. The nation itself feels suspended in this same heavy air. In 1855, arguments over slavery are sharpening across the United States. Newspapers rage, politicians posture, ministers preach. Ordinary people argue in parlours, taverns, churches, and on courthouse steps. But for black Americans, the issue is not abstract. It is breakfast, clothing, custody, wages, travel, marriage, learning, sleep. It is whether your name belongs to you by nightfall, so you keep moving through the day because there is no real alternative. You carry water, you lift bales, you sew seams, you wash shirts raw at the knuckles, you steer carts, sweep floors, mind children, mend tools, stir kettles, and memorize faces. You learn who can be trusted a little, who should be avoided entirely, and who smiles like a trap set in velvet. By now, the morning has become a whole world. Not quiet, exactly, not peaceful, but full of strain, yes, and also of knowledge. You have smelled the smoke and damp boards, you have heard wagon wheels, whispered prayers, and shouted commands. You have felt cold water on your hands and dust on your ankles, and through it all, one truth remains steady. In 1855, black Americans live at the edge of change. But they do not merely wait for history to happen to them. They wake, rise, work, protect, remember, and endure within it, with a steadiness more impressive than many famous men in polished boots and very serious waistcoats. History can be rude like that. It keeps discovering that the people treated as marginal were carrying the centre all along. By the time the morning settles into full daylight, work has already claimed your body. You feel it first in the hands. That is where 1855 often announces itself. In sore fingers, split nails, stiff wrists, and palms toughened by repetition. Whether you stand on a plantation road, in a tobacco shed, by a forge, inside a washroom, or near a harbour crane. Labour defines the shape of the day. It sets the pace, decides the posture, and leaves its quiet record on skin. For black Americans in 1855, work is never just work. It is survival, control, bargaining, punishment, pride, and sometimes the narrowest path toward a better future. The same skill can feed you in one place and be stolen from you in another. The same strong back admired for productivity can be exhausted without mercy. The same clever hands that build, sew, carve, cook, heal, and repair may never legally belong to the person using them. If you are enslaved in the cotton South, field labour can begin soon after sunrise and stretch until dusk, with only short pauses. The rows seem endless. Cotton plants scratch your forearms and snag your clothes. Dust rises around your ankles. Heat presses against your neck like a damp cloth that no one removes. You bend, pull, gather, carry, bend, pull, gather, carry. The rhythm becomes so constant that the body almost learns to move without permission from the mind. Cotton work is not elegant. It is tiring in an almost mechanical way. The sacks grow heavier as the hours pass. Shoulders burn, lower backs ache. The sun settles on the spine with grim determination. There is always the pressure of weight and speed. Too little picked means scrutiny. Too much left behind means complaint. Even the plants seem to participate in the injustice, scratching at your skin as if they have taken sides. In tobacco regions, the labour differs. tobacco's demanding in its own fussy way. Plants must be set, hoed, topped, cut, cured, sorted, and packed. The leaves are sticky and pungent, sheds smell sharp, green, and earthy all at once. Inside curing barns, the air can feel thick enough to wear. Handling tobacco calls for care, timing, and experience. A careless hand can damage a crop. That is the irony of slave labour. Enslavers depend on intelligence and skill while pretending the people providing both possess neither. In rice country, work can become a battle against water, insects, fever and fatigue. Mud sucks at your feet. Mosquitoes whine past your ears with insulting enthusiasm. The wet heat settles over the marshes and fields until every movement feels heavier than it should. Rice cultivation is highly skilled and historically drew on deep agricultural knowledge, including expertise shaped by West African traditions. That knowledge had enormous value. It increased profits for enslavers while adding to the burden of those forced to use it. Sugar work is harsher still. The cane itself cuts skin. Processing is intense and urgent because timing matters. During harvest and grinding seasons, labour can continue deep into the night. The mills are loud, hot, and dangerous. Steam, smoke, and sweet vegetal smell fill the air. Even when described politely, sugar work sounds like a world built by exhaustion. Yet not all labour happens in open fields. Many enslaved black Americans work in skilled roles that demand training, judgment, and precision. You might be a blacksmith, a carpenter, a cooper, a brickmaker, a miller, or a boatman. You may shoe horses, fit wagon wheels, repair iron tools, shape timber, build fences, or lay brick in careful lines. You may know how to read weather from the sky, assess a damaged beam with one glance, or hear from the ring of metal whether something has been forged properly. A skilled enslaved craftsman can be especially valuable to an owner. That value rarely means justice. It usually means closer supervision and greater profit for someone else. In some places, enslaved artisans are hired out to other employers. Their labour earns money, but the wages pass largely or entirely into another man's hands. Sometimes a portion is allowed to remain with the worker, sometimes not. Arrangements vary. The imbalance does not. There is a strange cruelty in being praised for work while denied ownership of your own effort. You can produce excellence every day and still remain legally treated as property. You can build a house you will never live in, craft furniture you will never own, mend tools that will be used to control you, and raise crops that fill markets you cannot freely enter. If you are a free black labourer in a city, work offers a little more independence, though never enough to relax into it. You may head to the docks at dawn, where the air smells of fish, rope, salt water, tar, and wet wood. Crates slam onto planks. Sailors shout in accents from half the Atlantic world. Gulls wheel overhead like rude supervisors. Here the body matters, but so does timing. You carry, stack, unload, and haul. A missed job means lost pay. An injury can topple an entire household budget. Free black dock workers, sailors, caulkers, and teamsters are part of the bloodstream of commerce. Goods move because someone lifts them. Ships turn around because someone loads them correctly. Wharves stay active because somebody sweeps, secures, repairs, and watches. Yet despite this importance, black workers face exclusion from certain jobs, wage discrimination, and harassment from white labourers who resent their presence while benefiting from the same economic system. Human beings are wonderfully inventive at depending on what they claim to despise. In southern ports, some enslaved labourers also work on docks, warehouses, and rivers, especially in places tied to coastal trade. These jobs can offer wider contact with the world. That contact brings information, temptation, and risk. A person working near ships may hear political news early, learn of routes and schedules, or meet sailors who speak about distant places where slavery is weaker or absent. The waterfront carries rumour the way wind carries smoke, fast and everywhere. Domestic labour forms another large part of black working life in 1855. If you are an enslaved cook, maid, nurse, laundress, or butler in a white household, your labour is intimate and relentless. You rise early to light fires, fetch water, scrub pots, sweep floors, prepare food, mend linens, brush coats, carry trays, wash children, and stand ready for the next bell. The work is indoors, but that does not make it easy. It requires stamina, patience, memory, and the ability to move quickly while appearing calm. Kitchens are hot, smoky worlds, iron pots hiss, bread bakes, fat spits. Ash settles into corners. You smell onions, grease, yeast, wood smoke, soap, wool, and sometimes expensive spices that signal luxury for the family upstairs, but only more labour for the people below. Cooking for large households demands planning and skill. A good cook manages heat, timing, storage, seasoning, and scarcity. There is artistry in it. There is also strain in every joint. Laundering may be even more punishing than some people realise. You haul water, heat it, soak garments, scrub them, boil them, wring them, starch them, dry them raw, and iron them. The steam dampens your face, soap roughens the skin, irons are heavy, shirts seem endless. The work can consume entire days, especially for women who then turn to sewing or childcare without any meaningful rest. For free black women in towns and cities, domestic service is also one of the most common forms of paid employment. You may work in another person's house by day and then return home to your own household duties at night, or you may take in washing, sewing, or boarders. You stretch every coin carefully. Rent must be paid, food must be bought, clothing must be mended again and again. Work outside the home supports work inside it, and both depend on endurance. Some black women sell produce, baked goods, fish, or small handmade items in local markets. Market work can require keen judgment. You must know how much to charge, when to bargain, whom to trust, and how to protect yourself from petty fraud or official interference. Markets are loud places. Chickens protest from baskets. Buyers haggle. Carts clatter past. Children dart between legs. You smell apples, damp straw, sweat, tobacco, mud, and fresh bread all at once. It is a world of quick eyes and quicker decisions. Barbershops offer a different kind of labour. In many American cities, black barbers are known for highly skilled grooming, especially for white clients. It is one of history's stranger arrangements. A black barber may shave, trim, style, and converse with elite white customers who would never accept him as a social equal. The barbershop itself can be polished and orderly. Mirrors gleam, brushes rest in neat rows. The scent of pomade, soap, bay rum, and warm towels fills the room. Conversation moves from politics to business to local scandal. The barber listens, remembers, and measures his words carefully. There is even a quirky side to this trade. Some barbers became connoisseurs of fashion and public behaviour, able to judge a man's station by the shape of his whiskers, the quality of his boots, or the nervous speed of his small talk. A barber often knew who was in debt, who was courting, who was lying, and who had terrible sideburns. One should never underestimate the historical power of a man holding a razor near someone's throat. Blacksmithing is another craft with deep importance. A blacksmith's shop is hot, noisy, and alive with sparks. The hammer rings out in a rhythm that carries down the road. Metal glows orange at the forge. Sweat gathers under the shirt. Coal smoke mixes with the sharp scent of hot iron. Here labour looks almost theatrical, but the skill is exact. You must know temperature, timing, force, and shape, horseshoes, hinges, tools and nails, wagon fittings, and farm implements all pass through your hands. Without such work, daily life begins to stall. Carpentry demands equal precision. Wood has grain, mood, and memory. It can split if treated badly. It can endure for decades if cut well. A black carpenter may frame buildings, make doors, shape furniture, repair roofs, or fit window shutters in towns where white customers admire the finished product while refusing dignity to the maker. That contradiction appears everywhere in 1855. The nation is full of objects crafted by people it will not honour properly. Children work too, especially in slavery. Their tasks may begin small, but small tasks accumulate. Mind the baby, bring water, gather chips for fuel, feed chickens, hold this, carry that, keep quiet, be useful. Childhood is measured not by toys alone, but by responsibilities handed down too early. Still, children learn skills from elders with startling speed. A boy may begin understanding tools before he can write his own name. A girl may learn cooking, spinning, mending, or market habits through observation long before adulthood officially arrives. Not all labour is physical in the same obvious way. There is emotional labour too, though people in 1855 would not have used that phrase. An enslaved nursemaid must soothe white children while perhaps missing her own. A servant must absorb insult without visible reaction. A free worker must smile to keep a position. A seamstress must sit patiently through customers who treat her as both essential and invisible. This kind of labour leaves no callous you can point to, though it wears a person down all the same. There is also the labour of strategy. Black Americans in 1855 are constantly calculating which employer pays fairly enough to stay, which route home is safest, which market day brings better prices, which white official can be approached carefully, which stranger asks too many questions, which skill might be turned into extra income, which favour creates debt, which silence protects a family. Every day includes decisions made under pressure. Historians still debate the exact degree to which skilled enslaved workers could leverage their value into small privileges, better treatment, or chances to earn money independently, because the evidence varies by region and by owner. Some did gain limited room to negotiate. Others found that added skill only increased expectations and control. Talent does not guarantee freedom when the entire system is arranged against you. And yet labour also creates reputation. A good carpenter is known, a reliable washerwoman is sought out, a strong dock worker gets called back, a cook with talent becomes indispensable, a midwife earns trust from household to household, a blacksmith with steady hands builds more than tools. He builds local dependence. Within black communities, such reputations matter deeply. Work becomes a form of standing, identity, and mutual support. By late afternoon, the body has changed. Clothes cling with sweat, muscles dull into heaviness. The smell of the day settles into fabric and skin. Smoke, iron, salt, flour, soap, mud, livestock, river water, starch, leather. Labour leaves its own perfume, and it is rarely delicate. But in that weariness there can still be pride. You completed difficult things. You fed people. You repaired what was broken. You carried weight others could not. You transformed raw material into use, order, and survival. That truth matters. In 1855, black Americans are not merely used for labour. They are the makers of daily life itself. They cook the meals, raise the structures, guide the wagons, shape the tools, load the ships, mend the clothes, tend the children, and keep local economies moving with skill that the wider society depends on while pretending not to notice. It is one of the era's most revealing habits. Power talks loudly. Competence often works in silence. As evening edges closer, tools are set down, aprons are shaken out, fires are banked, and carts roll homeward through dust and fading light. The body hurts, the wages may be thin or stolen, the recognition may never come, but the labour remains real. It fills the day, it proves ability, it leaves a mark on the world, whether that world is grateful or not. And all across the country, from fields to workshops to kitchens to wharves, Black hands keep building a nation that has not yet learned how much it owes them. When work loosens its grip for a few hours, you turn toward home. Though home in 1855 can mean many different things. It may be a single room with a packed earth floor. It may be a cabin of rough boards, patched against wind with scraps of cloth and stubborn hope. It may be a rented corner in a city house, where several families live within hearing distance of one another's dreams, arguments, and cooking pots. It may be a modest, free black household with a table, a chest, a Bible, a few chairs, and carefully guarded papers hidden where quick hands cannot easily find them. Whatever form it takes. Home is never just shelter. It is the place where people try to gather themselves back together after a day spent answering to force, necessity, and watchful eyes. If you are enslaved on a plantation, the cabin is often small, draughty, and built with little concern for comfort. Some have dirt floors, though wooden floors are not unknown. Some have one room, some have a loft. Many have a fireplace that smokes more than anyone would prefer. Gaps between boards admit winter cold, summer insects, and all the gossiping weather in between. Rain can find its way through roof seams with irritating confidence. The smell indoors is a mixture of ash, damp wood, cooked cornmeal, wool, sweat, and whatever food can be saved for later. Yet people make places from what they have. A shelf may hold a tin cup, a cracked bowl, and a precious spoon. A peg on the wall may support a hat kept as neat as possible. A trunk or box may contain treasured cloth, letters, scraps for mending, or small objects with meaning known only to the family. Quilts, if present, do more than warm the bed. They add pattern, memory, and care to a room otherwise defined by scarcity. A broom by the doorway speaks quietly of order. Even in cramped quarters, somebody has swept, somebody has folded cloth, somebody has made an effort, and that effort matters. Beds are often shared. Children sleep close to parents, siblings, grandparents, or all three, depending on who is present and who has not been sold away, hired out, or forced elsewhere. Straw pallets, rough mattresses, blankets worn thin by many winters, and patched coverlets make up the sleeping arrangements. Nothing is luxurious. The touch of the bedding can be scratchy, lumpy, or unexpectedly soft in one little corner where old fabric has been doubled. Sleep, when it comes, is valuable enough that the body learns not to complain too much. For free black families in cities, housing can be better built but no less uncertain. Rent must be paid with unsettling regularity. Landlords may be careless, exploitative, or both. A building may hold several households on different floors or in subdivided rooms. Hallways carry the smells of supper, lamp oil, wet boots, cabbage, soap, and coal smoke. Floorboards announce every step. Walls are thin enough to make privacy seem like an upper-class hobby. Still, a free household can offer something slavery attacks at its root. The chance, however fragile, to arrange family life by choice. That choice is never complete. Northern cities are not safe havens in the modern sense. Prejudice shapes where black families can live, how much they pay, and how easily they can be forced to move. In some places, neighbourhoods form partly from necessity and partly from community, drawing together churches, businesses, boarding houses, and kinship networks. In these streets, children know which door belongs to a widow who watches over everyone, which yard contains the fiercest goose in the district, and which stoop gathers the best evening conversation. Home life begins with practical things. Fire must be lit or fed. Water must be fetched or poured. Supper must be made from what is available, which is not always what is desired. Cornbread, salt pork, beans, greens, fish, rice, potatoes, molasses, and whatever can be grown, traded, or stretched into one more meal may appear on the table. In cities, Bread and market produce can widen the menu if money allows. In rural places, a garden may add onions, peas, squash, or herbs. The smell of food transforms a room. Grease warming in a pan, onions softening, corn cakes browning, greens simmering low. Even a simple supper can turn a tired cabin into a place of comfort for an hour. Cooking is skilled work under any conditions. It becomes even more impressive when fuel is short, equipment is limited, and ingredients fluctuate. A pot hung just right over a fire, a loaf judged by colour and smell rather than precise timing, a stew stretched without tasting thin. These are accomplishments hidden in plain sight. Historians have recovered many broad details about diet, but they still dispute how varied daily meals could be from region to region and season to season, especially among enslaved households with different access to gardens, fishing, hunting, and extra food networks. The evidence changes by place. Hunger, however, is the one ingredient that appears too often. Family life itself is shaped by law, distance, and fear. Under slavery, marriage is deeply real in emotional and social terms, but often denied full legal recognition. Husband and wives may live on separate plantations and visit only when passes, distance, and an owner's mood allow. Parents can tuck children into bed knowing that no legal barrier firmly prevents a sale. That knowledge sits in the room even during ordinary evenings. It is present when a mother braids a child's hair. It is present when a father repairs a shoe by firelight. It is present in every promise people make to one another, despite having no guarantee they will be allowed to keep it. This is what gives domestic tenderness in 1855 such force. A parent teaching a child how to tie cloth around sore feet is not performing a small act. A grandmother humming while shelling peas is not merely passing time. A husband saving the best bite of supper for his wife is not trivial. In households under constant threat, affection becomes a form of insistence. You are still human. You are still kin. You are still mine in the ways that matter, whatever the law says. Children fill these spaces with motion. They chase one another around stools, crouch near the hearth, ask questions adults are too tired to answer fully, and play with astonishing ingenuity. A corn cob can become a doll, a stick can become a soldier, a horse, or a sceptre. Bits of string, fabric, shell, and wood become toys through sheer imaginative force. Laughter arrives easily in children, even where adults have good reason to guard it. The sound of it changes a room. For a moment, worry steps outside. There are lessons at home too, in free households. Parents may supervise reading if books are available and time allows. In enslaved households, instruction is more dangerous, but memory is always at work. Children learn names, songs, practical tasks, Bible verses, family stories, weather signs, and the habits of caution. They learn whom to trust. They learn how adults speak openly in some company and indirectly in other company. They learn the geography of danger by watching faces as much as by hearing words. One quirky domestic detail from the period appears in the use of decorative objects made from ordinary materials. Shells on a mantel, a bright ribbon saved far beyond reason, a painted box, carefully arranged crockery, or a sprig of greenery by a doorway could change the feeling of a room. Beauty did not wait for wealth. It often arrived in scraps. Human beings remain wonderfully committed to making life look a little better, even when history gives them absurdly poor supplies. In some enslaved communities, evenings include gardening, mending, and tending private plots after long work days. That means home is not entirely restful. It is another workplace, the one directed toward your own people rather than an owner's profit. A hoe may be lifted again. Chickens may need feeding. Clothing must be repaired. Shoes must be patched. Soap may be made. Food must be prepared for the next day. The hands almost never become idle, but the purpose feels different. Work done for home carries a quieter dignity. Among free black households, boarding can be an important strategy. A widow may rent a bed to a labourer, a married couple may take in a seamstress, a sailor between voyages, or a cousin newly arrived from another town. These arrangements help pay rent and create networks of news, support, and obligation. They also create crowding. Privacy slips away fast when one room contains sleep, cooking, storage, conversation, and illness all at once. Yet boarding houses can become places where people share leads on jobs, warn one another about kidnappers, arrange schooling, or collect money for a family in distress. The evening soundscape depends on where you live. In the countryside, frogs begin their work in ponds and ditches. Crickets start fiddling in the grass. Somewhere a mule complains with theatrical sorrow. Wind passes through trees with a dry whisper. In town, wheels rattle over stone or packed dirt. Neighbours call to one another from stoops. A baby cries through a wall. A church bell marks the hour. Somewhere nearby, someone is singing softly while folding clothes. Sound tells you how close everyone is. In 1855, people rarely live in the isolated privacy modern life sometimes imagines. Home is near other homes, other breath, other worry. Light is limited and precious. Candles cost money. Oil costs money. Firewood cost effort. So evening tasks often happen in dimness. Faces glow at the edge of lamp or hearth light, while the room beyond fades into shadow. Needlework strains the eyes. Reading, when possible, is done close to the flame. Children grow sleepy in layers, first slowing, then leaning, then slipping against an adult's side. The touch of a warm child's head against your arm can be enough to quiet the whole room for a minute. Cleanliness is pursued with determination despite difficult conditions. Basins of water, shared towels, careful brushing of clothes, and sweeping of floors all matter. Respectability is not simply vanity. It is protection, discipline, and self-regard. A clean collar, a neatly tied head wrap, polished shoes, or a well-kept apron can signal seriousness to the world and dignity to oneself. That is especially true for free black communities, where appearance may influence employment, church standing, and public treatment. It is also true in slavery, where personal order can become one of the few available expressions of self-possession. Hair care is often a domestic ritual in itself. Combing, braiding, wrapping, oiling, and parting take time and patience. The tug of a comb through thick hair can make children squirm and adults sigh. The smell of oil or pomade lingers pleasantly in the room. Braiding can be social, practical, and beautiful at once. It turns a tired evening into an act of care. In many homes, this is when stories surface, when gossip is exchanged, and when family advice is delivered with the firm authority of a person holding your head steady. There is, of course, no guarantee that home remains secure. Under slavery, a knock at the door can bring orders, demands, or news no one wants. On plantations and in towns, nighttime visits from patrollers, owners, or officials may shatter the fragile calm. In free states, kidnappers and hostile police make some families wary even behind locked doors. Legal freedom feels less solid when men can appear with papers, accusations, and confidence. That insecurity shapes the atmosphere of domestic life. Even at supper, part of the mind may be listening for footsteps. Scholars still debate the full extent to which enslaved families could maintain stable household forms over multiple generations, because records are uneven and often filtered through owners, officials, or later recollections. But the emotional reality is beyond dispute. Family was made and remade constantly under pressure. Kinship could include blood relatives, marriage partners, unrelated elders, godparents in all but name, and trusted neighbours who became family through endurance and care. Home was not only who slept under one roof, it was who would come running if trouble started. As night deepens, ordinary rituals settle the space. Shoes are placed near the bed, ashes banked in the hearth, leftover food is covered, a child's shirt is set out for mourning. Someone mutters a prayer, someone rubs aching hands, someone stares into the fire a little longer than necessary, because firelight gives a face permission to think. What strikes you most is not how little these households possess, though in many cases they possess very little. It is how much meaning is packed into each object, gesture and custom. The cup is not just a cup, it is the one not broken yet. The quilt is not just bedding, it is warmth, labour, memory, and shelter stitched together. The chair by the hearth is not just furniture, it is where a grandfather tells stories, where a mother nurses a baby, where a shirt is mended, where a tired man rests his spine for 10 precious minutes. Home in 1855 is fragile. But it is not empty, it is crowded with effort. It is built from cooking smoke, tired laughter, patchwork, prayer, discipline, and the stubborn refusal to let hardship have the final decorative choice. Outside, the wider nation debates power and profit in stern public language. Inside these rooms, people perform the quieter miracle of keeping one another alive, recognizable and loved. That may be the most important architecture of all. As evening settles more deeply over roads, alleys, fields and riverbanks, another kind of gathering begins. The air cools a little, lamps glow in windows, firelight flickers against boards and plaster. The day's labour still lives in your muscles, but now the body seeks something beyond rest. It seeks meaning, company, rhythm, and a way to carry burdens that do not fit neatly into words. For Black Americans in 1855, faith is not merely a matter of Sunday habit or inherited custom. It is shelter for the mind, structure for the heart, and often the strongest public language available for sorrow, hope, endurance, and moral worth. You may approach a church building if you live in a town or city. It might be plain from the outside, with modest walls, simple benches, and windows that let in just enough light. Or you may enter a larger African-American church in a northern city, where the congregation has raised funds, laid plans, and built something meant to endure. The room smells of wood polish, lamp oil, damp coats, wool shawls, and the faint sweetness of old paper Bibles. Boots scuff the floorboards. Children whisper and are promptly corrected. Women adjust bonnets and shawls. Men clear their throats, shake hands, and settle themselves into pews with the tired dignity of people who have earned their seat. If you are enslaved, worship may take different forms. Some plantations hold supervised services, led by white ministers or by enslaved preachers, expected to emphasize obedience, patience, and heavenly reward. Passages about servants obeying masters are favoured with suspicious enthusiasm. One notices that powerful people often develop a sudden devotion to selective reading. Yet even within those controlled gatherings, listeners hear more than the speaker intends. Words about Moses, deliverance, Babylon, and justice carry a life of their own. A story once set loose cannot always be made to stay polite. There are also quieter meetings beyond direct supervision. These may happen in cabins, clearings, brush arbours, or secluded corners of woods and fields. The place is chosen with care. Voices may be kept low at first, feet tread softly. A kettle or wet cloth might be used to muffle sound in some remembered accounts, though historians still argue over how widespread such practices truly were and in what forms they appeared across different regions. The broad truth remains clear. People created devotional spaces where they could speak more freely, feel more honestly, and interpret faith on their own terms. The sounds of worship matter as much as the words. You hear a leader begin a line, then others join in. A hymn rises slowly, not polished in the modern concert sense, but rich with breath, texture, and feeling. Voices overlap. One carries the melody, another bends around it. A child comes in late, then finds the tune. An elder's voice has a rough edge like weathered bark. The room gathers itself through sound. Singing is memory. Singing is teaching. Singing is feeling made public without needing full explanation. In 1855, black churches are among the most important institutions in American life. In northern cities, African Methodist Episcopal congregations, Baptist churches, and other independent black churches offer not only worship but education, leadership, mutual aid, and political discussion. They are places where announcements are made, collections taken, jobs shared, marriages recognized, children instructed, and people reminded that they are more than what the wider society says they are. The preacher may speak from Scripture, but everyone knows the sermon touches rent, law, danger, education, and dignity as well. The physical experience of these gatherings can be vivid. Benches press hard against tired backs. Summer heat gathers under the ceiling. In winter, cold air curls in around the door whenever it opens. A hand clasp feels warm, firm, and reassuring. A fan moves slow air across a flushed face. The smell of wet wool after rain mingles with candle smoke and human closeness. You are aware of bodies near you, breath near you, grief near you, and strength near you. Worship is not abstract in such a room. It is embodied, communal, and immediate. Preachers hold a powerful role, but not always in the grand formal style later generations may imagine. Some speak quietly and steadily, some rise into thrilling cadences, some reason carefully from text, others circle through metaphor, image, and repetition until the congregation is leaning in. A gifted black preacher in 1855 does more than explain religion. He interprets the world. He tells tired people that they are seen by God even when ignored by law. He tells fearful people that injustice is real but not final. He tells mothers, labourers, widows, children, and old men that their lives possess meaning beyond the market price assigned by others. Women are central to this world, even when formal leadership titles are limited by denominational custom. They organise fundraisers, teach children, lead singing, sustain prayer circles, nurse the sick, prepare meals, maintain charity networks, and often anchor the moral atmosphere of congregational life. Their labour in religious communities is constant and essential. Records from the era do not always honour this fully, but the daily functioning of churches makes it impossible to miss. Remove the women and the whole machine begins to wobble. Children absorb worship with all their senses. They may not follow every line of a sermon, but they know the mood of the room. They know when a prayer turns serious. They know when a hymn is beloved. They know when adults exchange that quiet look which means the preacher has touched a truth larger than the words on the page. Faith enters memory through repetition, tone, posture, and song long before it becomes doctrine. Music deserves special attention because it carries so much of the emotional life of the community. Spirituals and hymns can console, instruct, and unify all at once. Some are joyful in tempo, others grave and slow. Some seem to sway rather than march. A line repeated many times does not lose force, it deepens it. Repetition lets feelings settle into the body. It also helps those who cannot read participate fully. In a world where literacy is restricted for many black Americans, music becomes an archive stored in living breath. There is scholarly debate over how directly specific songs encoded messages about escape or resistance, and careful historians warn against turning every spiritual into a secret map. That caution is fair. Still, the emotional and symbolic force of this music is undeniable. Songs about crossing over, going home, chariots, rivers, and burdens speak differently when sung by people whose lives are constrained by slavery, surveillance, and separation. Meaning travels on several levels at once. That layered quality is one reason the music endures. Prayer itself takes many forms. A formal prayer in church may be measured, biblical, and resonant. A prayer in a home may be whispered over a sick child, spoken while kneeling beside a bed, or murmured while stirring a pot over the fire. On a plantation, A labourer may pray silently while walking to the fields, asking simply for enough strength to finish the day and protect the people he loves. Faith in 1855 is often practical. It asks for bread, safety, courage, and reunion. Not just grand theological clarity. Heaven matters, certainly, but so does tomorrow morning. There are also prayer meetings centred on healing, mourning, or crisis. A woman falls ill, a child dies, a husband has gone missing, a free man is seized under suspicion, a family lacks fuel for the week. In such moments, the congregation becomes more than a gathering. It becomes a support structure. Food is carried, coins are collected, watches kept. Prayers are offered not as decoration but as part of a wider system of care. Religion and mutual aid are tightly braided together. One quirky feature of church culture in some communities is the close observation of dress and deportment. A woman may own only a few garments, yet present herself with impressive elegance through careful cleaning, mending, and arrangement. A man may brush his coat meticulously and polish his boots until they nearly argue with the room's poverty. Hats, gloves, ribbons, collars, shawls, and handkerchiefs all carry social meaning. People notice. Churches can be tender places, but they are also human places. And human places contain style, pride, occasional vanity, and the occasional auntie whose raised eyebrow could stop a sermon. Faith does not erase disagreement. Black congregations in 1855 contained debates over respectability, politics, class, theology, education, and how openly one should confront slavery and racism. Some favour direct abolitionist activism. Others emphasise caution and institution building. Some ministers preach fiery challenge. Others preach steadier moral uplift. These differences reflect the variety of black life itself. No community is one single voice, even when outsiders lazily imagine it that way. In free black churches of the North, anti-slavery activism often pulses near the surface or directly at the centre. Meetings may include speeches about legal dangers, fundraising for schools, announcements about lectures, or collections for people escaping bondage. Visiting speakers might bring news from other cities. Newspapers may circulate hand to hand. The church becomes a place where spiritual life and public life meet without apology. There is no neat border between the two because the times do not allow one. Among enslaved people, faith can offer something slavery cannot comfortably tolerate. It teaches inward worth. It imagines a judge above earthly masters. It frames suffering within a story larger than the plantation ledger. It gives language to grief that might otherwise choke the chest. It also creates fellowship, and fellowship can become solidarity. That is one reason enslavers often tried to supervise religion rather than ban it outright. They wanted its discipline without its liberation. History rarely grants such tidy bargains. As night grows later, singing may soften. A final hymn lingers in the beams. Prayer closes the gathering. People step back into cool air, carrying the aftertaste of song. You hear footsteps on packed ground, low conversation, distant insects. Perhaps the creak of a wagon somewhere on the road. The sky above is enormous and indifferent. Yet the people beneath it feel less alone than they did an hour earlier. At home, the sacred continues in smaller ways. A mother teaches a child to fold hands and say a simple prayer. An old man recites a psalm from memory. A woman hums a spiritual while braiding hair by the fire. A labourer too tired for long devotion simply sits in silence, letting one remembered line of scripture rest in his mind like a warm stone. Religion in 1855 is not confined to formal service. It moves through kitchens, doorways, sickbeds, and sleeping rooms. It enters ordinary life because ordinary life needs it there. You also notice how faith shapes language itself. People speak of trials, blessings, burdens, mercy, grace, deliverance, and keeping on. These are not ornamental words. They form part of the emotional grammar of the age. A person may describe survival in religious terms because religion offers the richest available vocabulary for endurance. When the world feels unstable, sacred language can steady the mind. Historians continue to debate the precise balance between African inheritances and Christian transformation in black religious life by the middle of the 19th century. In some places, ring shouts, call and response patterns, rhythmic movement, healing traditions, and expressive worship style suggest deep continuities. In others, the evidence is harder to trace clearly. Yet the broader picture is plain enough. Black Americans did not passively receive religion. They reshaped it, inhabited it, and made it answer the needs of their own communities. That creative power may be the most striking thing of all. A society that denies full humanity still cannot prevent people from building a theology of dignity. A legal system that protects property more carefully than families still cannot silence a room full of believers singing hope into the dark. Faith becomes both refuge and declaration. It says that suffering is real, evil is real, and weariness is very real indeed. But it also says that none of these have ultimate authority, and so, under lamps, under stars, under roofs of boards and roofs of plaster, Black Americans in 1855 gather to pray, sing, listen, and strengthen one another. The songs hold memory, the sermons frame hardship, the prayers name both fear and trust. In a nation deeply compromised by its own contradictions, these gatherings create moments of moral clarity. For a few precious hours, the soul is allowed to stand upright. By 1855, you learn very quickly that law is not some distant thing kept politely inside books. It walks the streets, it sits in courthouses, it rides on horseback, it knocks at doors, it asks for papers. It decides where you may travel, whom you may testify against, whether your family can stay together, and how much danger can fit inside an ordinary afternoon. For Black Americans, whether free or enslaved, the law is rarely a neutral presence. It is active, personal, and often unsettlingly creative in the ways it can make life smaller. If you are enslaved, the legal structure surrounding you is brutal in its clarity. You are treated not as a full citizen, but as property under state law. That one fact reaches into everything. It shapes marriage, movement, labour, punishment, and inheritance. A person may love, work, worship, and think with all the complexity of any other human being. Yet the legal system insists on describing that life through ownership. It is a cold language for a warm body. This structure varies by state, and the details matter. In some places, enslaved people may not legally gather in certain numbers without white supervision. In some places, they may not travel without written permission. In some places, teaching them to read is forbidden or heavily discouraged. Patrol systems, local ordinances, and county practices differ, but the wider message remains the same. Mobility is suspicious, literacy is threatening. Independence is to be contained. That message is enforced in ordinary ways that become extraordinary once you live under them. A pass must be shown. A question must be answered correctly. A road must be avoided after dark. A stranger's gaze must be read quickly. A patroller may stop you simply because he can. The sound of hooves at night, the creak of leather, the jingle of tack. These are not just background noises. They can turn the stomach before a single word is spoken. Sleigh patrols remain one of the most feared features of Southern life. These groups, sometimes formal and sometimes loosely organized, monitor movement, inspect passes, break up gatherings, and search for runaways. Their presence can make the countryside feel permanently watched. Even a lawful visit between family members may carry risk if the documentation is questioned, or if the patroller is drunk, angry, bored, or eager to display authority. Power and pettiness make an especially miserable combination. In towns and cities, the law can be no kinder. Urban black life is shaped by ordinances that regulate curfews, assembly, employment, residency, and public behaviour. free black residents may be required to register, carry documents, or pay special fees. In some southern states, free black people face mounting legal pressure simply for existing outside slavery. Legislators and local officials often view them as examples too dangerous to ignore. A free black person living visibly, respectably, and independently can unsettle a society built on racial hierarchy more than many speeches ever could. That is one reason free papers matter so much. These documents are not elegant abstractions. They are shields made of ink. You may fold them carefully and keep them close to the body. You may check for them more than once a day. You may hide them in a lining, tuck them into a Bible, or place them in a box beneath clothing. Their paper texture, their creases, their worn edges, all become familiar through anxious handling. And missing paper is not just inconvenience, it is exposure. And yet papers are only as powerful as the people who agree to honour them. A free black man may be stopped and challenged anyway. A free black woman may face suspicion from officials who assumed a seat before listening. An illiterate person may be especially vulnerable if made to rely on documents others can read, but he cannot. The legal world is full of opportunities for manipulation by those already favoured within it. Nowhere is this clearer than in the shadow cast by the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. Even in 1855, 5 years after its passage, the law still chills black communities in the North. It strengthens the power of slaveholders and their agents to pursue alleged fugitives across state lines. It also limits the legal protections available to the accused. That means a free black person in a northern city can never fully dismiss the possibility of being seized on a claim, true or false, and dragged into a system eager to mistake black presence for black property. So the street becomes legal terrain. A walk to work is not merely a walk, it is a movement through risk. Who is watching? Who is asking questions? Who has the authority to detain? Who has the confidence to lie? Black communities adapt with vigilance. Neighbours watch corners. Church leaders spread warnings. Families teach children whom to avoid. Some people travel in pairs when possible. Others memorize names of trustworthy lawyers, ministers, or activists. Caution becomes a daily craft. Courthouses themselves inspire mixed feelings. These buildings promise justice in carved stone and solemn posture, yet for many black Americans they function more often as theatres of unequal power. Inside, records are filed, ownership disputes settled, licenses granted, fines imposed, and human lives categorized. A courthouse smells of paper, dust, wood polish, damp wool, and the faint stale odour of too many men waiting too long indoors. Boots scrape, doors click shut, pens scratch across documents with absurd calm while lives outside hang in the balance. For free black Americans, access to the courts can be partial, restricted, or practically hollow in some jurisdictions. Black testimony against whites is barred or limited. Think about what that means for a moment. If the law refuses to hear your word against another man simply because of race, then theft, assault, fraud, or kidnapping can flourish behind a curtain of procedural respectability. A system does not need to shout its prejudice when it can file it quietly. Marriage laws reveal another layer of legal tension. Among free black people, legal marriage may be recognized in some places, though rights remain insecure compared with those of whites. Among enslaved people, marriages often carry spiritual and communal meaning without firm legal standing. Husbands and wives may pledge themselves before family, congregation, and God, while the law shrugs and keeps the sales ledger nearby. It is difficult to overstate how destabilizing that is. The state effectively announces that intimacy can exist, but it reserves the right to ignore its obligations. Children live within this legal uncertainty as well. Under slavery, a child's condition follows that of the mother, which means the system reproduces itself with bureaucratic efficiency. Birth is never just a family event, it is also an economic event for the owner. That truth casts a harsh light over maternity. A newborn's cry carries tenderness and market value at the same time. which is as ugly a combination as history can produce. Black sailors face another tangle of legal harassment. In some southern ports, free black seamen arriving on ships are jailed while the vessel is in harbour, supposedly for public safety. Public safety, one notices, is a phrase that often means the safety of somebody's prejudice. Authorities fear the movement of black men who have travelled, observed other societies, and moved with relative freedom. A sailor brings more than cargo. He brings comparisons. Travel by land carries its own hazards. Stagecoach drivers may refuse passage. Inns may deny lodging. Local officials may demand explanation. Roadside encounters depend heavily on who holds local power and how eager they are to use it. A free black traveller moving with correct papers may still find the journey tense from sunrise to dark. Every county line can feel like entering a new argument. One quirky but telling detail from legal culture is the importance of handwriting, seals, signatures, and small clerical habits. A pass poorly written might invite challenge. A paper without the expected flourish of a signature might be doubted. A clerk's spelling error could produce confusion with serious consequences. Entire lives may pivot on whether one official is diligent, lazy, prejudiced, or merely in a bad mood after a bad breakfast. Bureaucracy has always had a talent for making its own accidents feel like destiny. Cities in the north often pride themselves on law and order, but black residents know that order can still be selective. Police may protect property more readily than people. Courts may punish petty offences harshly, while failing to guard against racial violence or kidnapping. Mobs can emerge when legal institutions look away or quietly sympathise. In this environment, the line between official authority and social intimidation is not always bright. Sometimes the crowd and the courthouse seem to speak in different tones with the same mouth. There is also the matter of citizenship itself. By 1855, black Americans live in a country still deeply uncertain, or perhaps deliberately dishonest, about whether they fully belong within its political community. Free black men in some northern states can vote, while in others they face exclusion or property requirements not imposed on white men. That patchwork produces a maddening map of partial belonging. A man may be politically recognised in one place and nearly erased in another. The nation loves local variation when local variation helps preserve unfairness. Historians still debate how ordinary black Americans understood and discussed constitutional questions in daily life, especially outside formal activist circles. But there is no doubt that many followed legal developments closely. They had to. Court rulings, state laws, and local ordinances were not elite abstractions. They determined work, family security, mobility, and bodily safety. A legal change could travel from Washington or a state capital and arrive at your doorstep in the form of a stranger demanding compliance. This is why black institutions place so much emphasis on record-keeping, witnesses, church membership rolls, family Bibles, marriage certificates when available, apprenticeship papers, manumission papers, and letters of recommendation. Documentation becomes part of survival. The written record can never fully protect you, but without it your position may be weaker still. Literacy in such a world is not just empowering, it is defensive armour. At the same time, not every encounter with law is passive. Black Americans challenge, petition, hire attorneys, organise committees, and appeal to sympathetic officials where possible. Mutual aid societies may help gather money for legal defence. Church leaders may write letters, abolitionists may intervene, neighbours may testify. A person seized in one town may become the focus of urgent collective effort by evening. Resistance to legal oppression does not always look dramatic from a distance. Often it looks like a stack of papers, a borrowed sum, a rushed affidavit, a meeting in a church basement, and a woman refusing to let a case disappear quietly. The emotional effect of all this legal pressure is difficult to miss. You become attuned to signs, a uniform at the corner, a horse stopping too long outside, unfamiliar men asking names, the sound of official voices at the door. the sight of a courthouse notice pasted in public. Even when nothing happens, your nerves may behave as if something might. That steady state of alertness shapes the body. Sleep grows lighter, conversation becomes coded, memory sharpens around details that safer people never notice. And yet black communities continue to live, work, worship, marry, parent, teach, and build under this legal shadow. That persistence is not accidental. It rests on knowledge passed from person to person. Keep your papers dry. Learn who can read them. Avoid that road after dark. Do not answer more than asked. Send word to the church. Remember the lawyer's name. Watch the station. Trust Mrs. So if trouble comes. Such practical wisdom forms an unofficial legal education more urgent than anything found in polite textbooks. By the end of the day, you understand that 1855 is filled with laws, but not all of them serve justice. Some protect ownership, hierarchy, and public quiet more faithfully than they protect human dignity. Some create the appearance of order while distributing fear with remarkable efficiency. For black Americans, life under such a system means learning to read power in its smallest gestures. A document, a badge, a signature, a posted notice, a rider on the road, all can matter. The law speaks constantly, sometimes in grand language, sometimes in muttered threats, sometimes in neat clerical ink, and all the while black life must continue beneath its gaze, alert, adaptive, and far wiser about the true meaning of authority than authority would ever care to admit. Freedom in 1855 can be real, hard-won, and still terribly fragile. If you are a free black American living in the North, you may not wake to the direct authority of an owner. But that does not mean the day begins without fear. Freedom exists in your papers, in your wages, in the lease on your room, in the church pew your family claims each Sunday, in the fact that your children sleep under your roof because the law at least partly recognizes your household. These things matter profoundly. They are not illusions, yet around them stands a restless world of prejudice, exclusion, harassment, and the constant possibility that someone with a badge, a lie, or a mob behind him may decide your liberty is negotiable. You feel that tension in the body before you put it into words. It lives in the habit of checking who is following behind. It lives in the quick glance at a strange wagon slowing near the curb. It lives in how carefully a free paper is folded, unfolded, and folded again. It lives in the way mothers teach children not simply good manners, but defensive manners. Answer politely. Stay near known adults. Do not trust every smiling stranger. Come home before dark. The advice sounds ordinary until you realize how much threat sits beneath it. Northern cities offer possibilities unavailable in much of the South. There are black churches, schools, benevolent societies, newspapers, businesses, and neighborhoods where people know your name. A free black carpenter may contract his own work. A seamstress may take paying clients. A minister may preach openly against slavery. A sailor may sign on for a voyage and return with wages in hand. These things matter. They shape real communities. But freedom here is often an exposed freedom, visible and vulnerable, like a candle carried through a windy street. In Philadelphia, Boston, New York, and other cities, black communities create networks of care with impressive discipline. A church may double as a meeting place, political center, and emergency communications hub. A boarding house may shelter travelers while quietly passing along warnings. A barbershop may function as an information exchange. A mutual aid society may help with burial costs, illness, rent, or legal defense. The surface of life can look ordinary enough. Beneath it runs a current of constant preparedness. That preparedness is not paranoia, it is experience. The Fugitive Slave Act remains one of the darkest facts shaping free black life in 1855. The law gives federal support to the capture of alleged fugitive slaves and places free black people in danger of false accusation. A person born free in Pennsylvania or Massachusetts may still be seized if someone claims otherwise. You do not need to have escaped slavery to be hunted by slavery. That is the chilling genius of the system. It extends its reach by making blackness itself suspicious. Kidnapping is one of the deepest fears in free black communities, and not without reason. Men, women, and children can be abducted and sold south through fraud, violence, or forged claims. Sometimes the victim is targeted because he is alone. Sometimes because she lacks papers at that moment. Sometimes because the kidnappers know that black testimony may be ignored. Neighbours may be intimidated, and authorities may prefer not to look too closely. The city street, busy and public as it is, does not always protect. Crowds can hide crimes just as easily as they witness them. That danger changes the geography of daily life. Certain corners are avoided. Certain taverns are known to attract the wrong kind of men. Certain alleys become places you pass quickly or not at all. Children are taught routes by memory. Trusted adults may escort young people to school or church. Messages travel fast when a suspicious stranger appears. In many neighbourhoods, community members keep informal watch, observing unfamiliar faces, unusual questions, or vehicles lingering too long. Vigilance becomes part of the architecture, even where kidnapping is not immediate. Racial discrimination narrows freedom in 100 smaller ways. Employers may underpay black workers or refuse to hire them for skilled positions. White labourers may treat them as rivals and strike against working beside them. Landlords may charge more for worse rooms. Public conveyances may segregate or exclude. Schools may be inferior, if available at all. Hotels, restaurants, and theatres may shut their doors. A free black man may walk through his city with money in his pocket and still be reminded repeatedly that many people consider him out of place. The emotional fatigue of that sort of treatment can be heavy. There is the insult itself, then the labour of managing your reaction to it. You may keep your tone measured because anger could be used against you. You may smile thinly because you need the job. You may step aside because standing firm risks escalation. Freedom often requires performance in public. Calm face, controlled voice, careful posture, a great deal of dignity under ridiculous conditions. Black women carry particular burdens within this world. A free black washerwoman, cook, seamstress, domestic worker, or market seller must navigate not only racial prejudice, but also gendered vulnerability. Harassment, exploitation, and disrespect may come from employers, customers, officials, or men in the street. Yet women also knit communities together with formidable skill. They manage households, support church life, raise children, host borders, share warnings, and keep practical knowledge circulating. A neighbourhood often survives because women notice everything and forget very little. For children born free, the experience of liberty can be painfully mixed. They may attend school, learn to read, play in alleys and yards, and know their parents as legal guardians. These are significant blessings. At the same time, they grow up hearing adult conversations about kidnappers, court cases, riots, and fugitives hidden nearby. They learn early that freedom is not a simple condition. It is something to be guarded. A child may understand this not through theory, but through tone of voice, through the way the room changes when somebody knocks unexpectedly, through how fast a parent asks, "Who is it?" One of the more curious features of free black urban life is how often style and self-presentation carry extra weight. Clothing is never just clothing. A neatly brushed coat, a clean dress, polished boots, carefully tied neckwear, or a crisp bonnet can be practical signs of discipline, respectability, and self-possession. This does not guarantee fair treatment. Of course, bigotry is rarely defeated by a well-ironed collar. Still, presentation matters within communities and before a suspicious public. It can affect hiring, church standing, and the first impression you make before anyone has decided what kind of person they intend to pretend you are. There is something quietly heroic in the pursuit of ordinary respectability under hostile conditions. You pay rent, you show up on time, you raise children, you go to church, you save money, you learn a trade, you host a cousin newly arrived from another town, you keep your papers in order, you buy a chair, then a second chair, you acquire a Bible, a lamp, a better coat, perhaps a clock. These are humble achievements. In 1855, they can also be acts of moral insistence. You belong here. You are building a life. You're not passing through history like smoke. Free black seamen experience liberty in an especially uneasy way. Their work brings movement, wages, and exposure to broader worlds, but it also invites surveillance and legal harassment. In some southern ports, free black sailors from northern states or foreign countries are jailed while their ships remain in harbour, supposedly to prevent disorder. The idea seems to be that a black man who has seen too much of the world might contaminate local ideas by existing in public. Authorities have always shown remarkable concern for dangerous things like comparison. Comparison matters a great deal. A free black person in the north may hear of Canada as a safer destination, especially after the Fugitive Slave Act. He may hear of black communities there, of less direct risk from slave catchers, of land and schools and relative security, not perfection, not paradise, but perhaps breathing room. Some families debate whether to leave. The thought itself reveals how thin security can feel. When legal freedom at home still feels hunted, another border begins to look comforting. There are also internal class differences within free black communities. Some families have property, established trades, literacy, church leadership, and relative stability. Others live hand to mouth. Some move in circles shaped by reform societies and schools. Others spend most of life battling rent, illness, and irregular work. These differences can produce tension, but they also show the diversity of free black life. It is not one flat social experience. A prosperous caterer in Philadelphia, a domestic worker in New York, a sailor in Boston, and a farmer in rural Ohio all inhabit freedom differently. Historians still debate how much everyday optimism free black communities sustained in the face of such pressure, because the records preserve both confidence and fear. Some letters, speeches, and editorials pulse with determination and hope. Others reveal deep weariness and justified alarm. Both were surely true. Human beings are capable of courage and dread at the same breakfast table. Churches and mutual aid societies help steady the balance. A person wronged by an employer may find references for another job through church contacts. A widow may receive food or fuel from a benevolent association. A kidnapped person's case may bring out ministers, lawyers, and neighbours in urgent response. A family arriving from the south may be placed with boarders or directed toward work. Community institutions soften the edge of danger, even when they cannot remove it. A free black newspaper reader in 1855 may live with another peculiar burden. Information travels faster now than in earlier generations, and news often brings fresh reasons for concern. Reports of captures, court rulings, violence, political speeches, and sectional conflict all enter the home through print and conversation. To be informed is necessary, it is also exhausting. You turn a page and find another reminder that the nation cannot decide whether your freedom deserves protection. Very relaxing reading for the evening. Naturally, the street itself offers a daily lesson in contradiction. On one block you pass a black-owned business, a schoolroom, a church, and children playing with hoops or marbles. On the next you hear a slur from a passing cart, see a hiring sign that excludes you without bothering to say so openly, or notice a policeman studying you with more interest than the occasion requires. You move through aspiration and threat within the span of a few minutes. That rhythm becomes familiar, and never normal exactly, but familiar. For some free black families, home ownership becomes an especially meaningful goal. To own even a small house or plot of land offers stability, reputation, and a measure of independence from predatory landlords. The floorboards may creak, the roof may leak, the fence may lean at a troubling angle. But if the deed is yours, the feeling is profound. Property in this context is not greed, it is defense, it is continuity. It is a claim planted into the ground against a society that keeps trying to treat you as temporary. Yet even property cannot remove all risk. Race riots erupt in some northern cities during the antebellum period, often targeting black homes, churches, businesses, and schools. White resentment can gather suddenly around labour competition, politics, or the mere fact of black advancement. A well-kept house can be damaged by a mob no matter how respectable the family inside. This knowledge gives success its own nervous edge. Visibility can attract pride and danger at once. Still, free black Americans do not live only in reaction. They court, marry, joke, teach, save, worship, celebrate, and plan. They host literary societies, attend lectures, debate politics, train choirs, join temperance groups, and build schools. They enjoy music, food, fashion, and neighbourhood gossip. They make room for pleasure where they can. A Saturday evening gathering, a church picnic, a birthday meal, a walk in clean clothes on a fair day. These things matter. Joy under pressure is not trivial. It is one of the proofs of life. As night falls over the city, doors close and lamps are lit. Somewhere a mother checks twice that the bolt is set. Somewhere a father reviews where the papers are kept. Somewhere boarders trade the day's news in low voices. Somewhere a child asks a hard question and receives an answer softened for sleep. The room smells of lamp oil, starch, supper, and worn wool drying near the hearth. Outside, wheels rattle past. Footsteps pause, then move on. You lie down free, and that word is precious. Yet it is also unsettled, watched, and defended. In 1855, for black Americans beyond slavery's formal reach, liberty is not a broad meadow where one can wander carelessly. It is more like a narrow path lined with thorns, carefully maintained by community, faith, vigilance, and sheer determination. It gives room to walk, but not always to relax. It belongs to those who hold it tightly, document it carefully, and protect one another within it. Freedom is there, it simply cannot afford to sleep too deeply. In 1855, learning can feel almost dangerous simply because it opens the mind so quietly. A book does not shout. A slate does not threaten anyone by itself. A child tracing letters with a finger on a tabletop hardly seems like a revolutionary act. And yet for black Americans, especially in a country built on slavery and racial hierarchy, education carries unusual force. To read is to gather information without asking permission. To write is to leave a record in your own hand. To count, copy, memorize, and interpret is to gain tools that can defend wages, guide travel, preserve scripture, connect families, and sharpen judgment. Small marks on a page can make powerful people extremely nervous, which tells you quite a lot about the page. If you are free and living in a northern city, you may have access to a school built specifically for black children. Though access does not guarantee comfort or quality, the schoolroom might be crowded, underfunded, and cold in winter. The benches may be hard and the windows may rattle in the wind. Ink can be scarce, books worn thin, and slates passed from hand to hand until their edges chip. Still, the room holds something precious, intention. Families have worked, petitioned, donated, and argued to make it exist. Each child who walks through the door represents parental sacrifice and community hope, bundled into shoes that may or may not fit properly. You can picture the room. Morning light falls across rough desks. Chalk dust rests on sleeves and fingertips. Wet wool coats hang by the door after rain. A teacher calls for quiet with the particular look that all teachers somehow master across the centuries. Children recite letters, numbers, scripture verses, and spelling lists in chorus. The sound rises and falls like a small tide. Some students sit straight with solemn concentration, others fidget, whisper, or drift toward the window whenever a cart rattles past outside. Human nature, thankfully, does not vanish in the pursuit of literacy. The teacher's role is heavy. In many black schools, one instructor manages multiple ages and levels at once. One child is still learning the alphabet while another practices copywork, another recites arithmetic tables, and another stumbles through a passage aloud. Lessons require order, patience, and constant improvisation. The teacher must correct posture, calm disputes, sharpen attention, and protect the room from discouragement. This is not merely instruction. It is institution building in miniature. For free black communities, education is tied closely to advancement and respectability. Parents want children to read the Bible, keep accounts, write letters, understand contracts, and navigate the dangers of adult life. They also want something larger. They want proof against the lie of inferiority. A well-read child is not just a student. He is an answer. A girl who writes a clear hand, solves sums, and speaks confidently before a class becomes living evidence against a society eager to underestimate her. The conditions are not easy. White school boards may provide less money for black schools than for white ones. Buildings may be inferior. Supplies may arrive late or not at all. Teachers may be underpaid. Neighbourhood hostility can be sharp. Some white residents object even to the existence of black education, as though ignorance was somehow the more natural arrangement. It is a revealing sort of cruelty. Deny the ladder, then criticise the climb. Even so, black communities persist. Churches host classes. Benevolent societies raise funds. Parents contribute what they can, sometimes pennies at a time. Older students help younger ones. Literate neighbours tutor children in evenings. A school may be fragile in budget and furnishings, but sturdy in purpose. That purpose gives the room its real architecture. In the South, the picture changes dramatically. In many slave-holding states, teaching enslaved people to read is illegal, restricted, or socially dangerous. These limits hardened after earlier rebellions, when white authorities concluded that literacy could spread unsettling ideas. They were right, though perhaps not in the melodramatic way they imagined. Reading does not automatically produce insurrection. It does produce awareness, memory, and comparison. A person who reads can encounter the Bible directly, see how laws are written, understand passes and permits, follow political arguments, and perhaps write to family. That is more than enough to worry a fearful system. So if you're enslaved and learning to read in 1855, the process may happen in secret, in fragments, and with great care. A child in the owner's house may notice letters from a white child's lesson book. A trusted adult may whisper the sounds quietly after dark. A page may be hidden inside clothing. A bit of charcoal may serve where pencil is lacking. Letters might be practiced on a board, in dust, in ashes near the hearth, or simply in the mind. Memory becomes a schoolroom when paper is risky. The secrecy changes the feeling of learning. Every lesson has an edge. A whispered spelling exercise is not just education. It is defiance wrapped in quiet. The room may be dim, lit only by the last of the fire or a faint lamp turned low. Outside, insects rasp in the dark. Inside, someone sounds out a word slowly, trying not to speak above a murmur. The learner's finger moves over a page already worn from being folded, hidden, and handled with nervous care. The paper feels thin. The moment feels enormous. Adults seek learning too. A grown man may ask a child who knows a few letters to help him sound out a passage. A woman may memorize words from a Bible read aloud by someone else and begin connecting sound to print over time. A free black artisan may improve his reading to manage accounts more confidently, or follow abolitionist newspapers. Learning is not confined neatly to childhood. In communities under pressure, Education tends to leak beyond official age limits because practical need refuses to stay tidy. There is also a strong oral culture around learning. Many Black Americans preserve knowledge through memory, recitation, storytelling, sonado, song, and spoken instruction. This matters greatly because literacy, though powerful, is not the only intellectual tool available. A person may know family history, scripture, herbal remedies, work techniques, roots, social warnings, and moral lessons without ever reading a line on paper. Historians sometimes focus so heavily on literacy that they risk underestimating the sophistication of oral knowledge. In 1855, memory as a library carried inside the body. Still, reading has a particular shine because it creates independence from gatekeepers. You do not need a white minister to tell you what a verse says if you can read it. You do not need an employer to interpret a paper entirely on his own if you recognize the words yourself. You do not need to trust that someone copied your name correctly if you can write it. Even signing your name instead of making a mark changes how you stand in the world. The motion of the pen across paper becomes a small declaration. I am present here in my own hand. Spelling books, primers, Bible passages, arithmetic tables, and copybooks form the basic materials of many lessons. Children repeat letters aloud, then syllables, then words. They copy lines carefully, trying to keep the letters neat. Some lessons are rigid and moralizing, full of little maxims about industry and virtue. 19th century educational material can be astonishingly fond of instructing children to behave, as though children across time have ever found that invitation exciting. Yet even dull material becomes meaningful when access to it has been denied. Arithmetic matters as much as reading. Numbers help with wages, purchases, debt, and measurement. A free black labourer who can keep track of his earnings is harder to cheat. A market woman who can total sales and change quickly protects her household more effectively. A carpenter measuring boards or a seamstress measuring cloth benefits from mathematical confidence. Education in this sense is not ornamental. It is immediately useful. One quirky feature of many 19th century classrooms is the prominence of recitation. Students stand and repeat lessons aloud, often from memory, before the teacher. This creates a schoolroom soundscape quite unlike modern quiet desks and private worksheets. Voices overlap. A child stumbles and starts again. Another delivers a passage with dramatic certainty well beyond the actual depth of understanding. Somewhere, inevitably. One student becomes extremely interested in a crack in the wall at the exact moment his turn arrives. Some educational traditions never truly disappear. Black teachers themselves deserve special attention. Whether formally trained or largely self-taught, they often carry enormous moral responsibility. They're expected to shape character as well as intellect. In some communities, they become local leaders, letter writers, organisers, and examples of what black education can produce. Their own presence in front of a class is instructive. It tells students that authority can wear a black face, hold a book, and command a room without apology. Women play a major role here too. Black women teach in schools, instruct children at home, organise educational fundraising, and preserve literacy within families. A mother who cannot attend a formal class may still insist that her children practice letters. A grandmother may supervise recitation by memory. A young woman employed as domestic worker may use scarce evening time to improve her own reading. These efforts do not always survive in official records, but they shape generations. There is ongoing scholarly debate about how widespread literacy among enslaved people truly was by the mid-1850s, because secrecy, uneven records, and regional variation complicate the evidence. Some communities show more literacy than older stereotypes assumed. Others remained more restricted. What is certain is that the desire for learning was broad and persistent. The obstacles were not evidence of indifference. They were evidence of suppression. You can also see how education affects status within the community. A literate person may be asked to read a letter aloud, draft a petition, interpret a notice, or write to distant relatives. That ability brings trust and responsibility. In a boarding house or church group, the person who reads well may become the one others gather around when a newspaper arrives. The room grows quiet, chairs scrape closer. News enters through one voice and settles on many faces. Newspapers matter, especially in free black communities. They carry debates about abolition, politics, migration, church affairs, lectures, conventions, and legal threats. To read the news in 1855 is to enter a wider black public world. You begin to understand that local struggles connect to distant ones. A schoolboy in Philadelphia, a teacher in New York, a minister in Boston, and a fugitive family moving toward Canada may all inhabit the same printed conversation. Literacy turns scattered people into something more like a public. Education also shapes private life. Letters pass between separated relatives, between courting couples, between ministers and congregations, between migrants and those left behind. A letter can carry reassurance, advice, money requests, family updates, recipes, and moral instruction. It can preserve affection across distance. The paper may be folded and unfolded until the edges soften. Ink fades. Finger marks gather at the corners. The letter becomes an object of touch as much as text. For children, school can also be a place of delight. Friendships form, rivalries too. There is pleasure in getting an answer right, in mastering a new word, in reading a line smoothly after struggling with it for days, a warm schoolroom on a cold day, the scratch of slate pencil, the proud glance of a teacher, the shared grin between classmates when recitation ends. These are small joys, but real ones. Learning under pressure is still learning. It can still carry excitement. Of course, education also brings disappointment. A child may have to leave school early to work. Fees may become too much. A teacher may move away. A schoolhouse may close for lack of funds. In the South, a secret learner may be discovered or forced to stop. Progress can be uneven and fragile. That fragility gives each gained skill a sharper value. Every word learned is secured against forgetting as carefully as possible. By candlelight, by fireplace glow, under strict teachers and patient mothers, in formal classrooms and hidden corners, Black Americans in 1855 keep building minds that the wider society would prefer remain easier to control. They spell, count, recite, memorize, copy, and interpret. They teach one another where the law forbids it. They organize schools where the state neglects them. They treat books not as decorations but as tools, companions, and sometimes lifelines. In a nation full of speeches about liberty, education offers a quieter kind of freedom. Not complete freedom, not safe freedom, but inward room, a widening of thought, a stronger grip on language, number, and self. That is why so many people chase it, protect it, and pass it on. A letter learned at a rough desk or whispered in a dark cabin can do more than form a word. It can begin to form a person who cannot be contained so easily. Not every act of resistance in 1855 looks dramatic from a distance. There are no trumpets for most of it. No glowing spotlight. No tidy line between courage and fear. Much of it happens in ordinary clothes, in ordinary rooms, with ordinary voices kept deliberately calm. Resistance can be loud, certainly. It can involve flight, confrontation, speeches, and public organizing. But for Black Americans living under slavery, under hostile laws, or under the constant threat of racial violence, resistance often begins in smaller choices. You keep a secret, you pass on information, you withhold full obedience, you protect someone, you learn something forbidden, you preserve your dignity in a setting designed to grind it down. These things may not fit neatly into heroic paintings, but they are real all the same. If you are enslaved, the most obvious form of resistance is escape. The decision to run is never simple. It means leaving known roads, known people, and even known suffering for the uncertainty of pursuit, weather, hunger, betrayal, and distance. You may travel by night, following stars, rivers, fences, or whispered directions. The ground feels different after dark. Leaves rustle more sharply. A snapped twig sounds much louder than it should. Dogs in the distance can chill the blood. The smell of wet earth, pine, mud, and sweat stays close as you move. Stop, listen, and move again. Yet not everyone can run. A mother with small children, an elderly man with failing legs, a woman whose husband is on another plantation, a skilled worker watched closely because of his value, all face different constraints. Freedom is desired widely. The practical chances of reaching it vary cruelly. That is why resistance takes many forms. To imagine only escape is to miss the enormous creativity of people resisting inside the system, as well as beyond it. Some resist by slowing labour, not openly enough to invite immediate punishment, but subtly. A tool takes longer to repair. A task is done carefully rather than quickly. Confusion appears at useful moments. Illness is claimed when possible. Work songs stretch the rhythm of the day. Enslavers and overseers complain endlessly about laziness, which says more about their own greed than about the people they judge. Still, hidden forms of labour resistance are common, because labour is where the system expects total extraction. Any reduction in that extraction matters. Tools can be broken, animals can be misdirected, goods can be damaged, food can disappear from the owner's stores and somehow reappear in a hungry cabin. A fence may not hold as firmly as expected. A message may fail to reach the right white person on time. None of this is random from the inside. It is part of a landscape where the weak are forced to use indirection, because open challenge is punished so harshly. At the same time, resistance may also mean protecting energy, body, and mind. A person preserves strength for family instead of spending every last ounce to enrich an owner. A woman keeps a bit of cloth, thread, or food back for her household. A father teaches a child caution and confidence in the same evening. A grandmother preserves songs, names, and stories that slavery would rather erase. Cultural survival itself becomes a form of refusal. You're not only what the ledger says, you are what your people remember, repeat, and pass on. Information is one of the most valuable things circulating through black communities in 1855. A rumour of a sale, the name of a brutal trader, the direction of a safe road, the presence of an abolitionist contact, news of a patrol, the character of a particular sheriff. These details travel hand to hand, voice to voice, often disguised as casual talk. A person who seems merely sociable may actually be maintaining a network. A labourer heading to market may return with more than produce. He may carry warning. This is why trust matters so much. Resistance depends on knowing whom to tell, whom to test, and whom to keep at a polite distance. Betrayal can destroy lives. A loose tongue can turn a hiding place into a trap. A boastful person may be more dangerous than an enemy, because enemies are expected to behave badly. Foolish friends can do worse by accident. Communities learn to measure character with impressive care. In free black communities, resistance often takes organised civic form. Meetings are held, funds are raised, petitions are drafted, lectures are given, vigilance committees watch for kidnappers and slave catchers. When someone is seized under suspicion, church leaders, neighbours, and activists may rush to gather witnesses, money, lawyers, and public attention. This kind of resistance is not glamorous in the usual sense. It involves paperwork, coordination, and people walking quickly through city streets with serious expressions. But it can save lives. Black newspapers also play a role. Editors, writers, and readers create a public conversation that pushes back against racist assumptions and anti-slavery complacency alike. A printed editorial can challenge policy, report abuse, or call a community to action. Newspapers help transform isolated outrage into shared understanding. They also remind black readers that they are part of a wider world of debate and purpose. A page of print does not swing a fist, but it can harden a spine. There are public speakers too, some famous, many local, all important, ministers, teachers, lecturers, and community leaders speak in churches, halls, and meeting rooms about slavery, citizenship, legal danger, and moral duty. Their language may be polished or plain, fiery or controlled. What matters is that they create a vocabulary for resistance that reaches beyond private pain. They name injustice out loud. They teach people how to interpret their own condition politically, spiritually, and practically. Women are central to resistance in ways older history has often softened or ignored. A black woman may hide a fugitive, collect funds, carry messages, shield children, negotiate with officials, host meetings, or quietly maintain the household that makes all other action possible. She may also resist through strategic politeness, careful observation, and the preservation of domestic stability under impossible strain. Some acts are visible, others are nearly invisible. Both can be essential. A movement sustained only by speeches would collapse by supper. One especially powerful form of resistance is education. To teach a child to read where reading is forbidden, to write a letter for someone separated from family, to memorize names and kinship lines, to interpret a newspaper aloud for neighbors. These acts build intellectual independence inside a system that depends on confusion and dependence. Every learned word becomes harder to take away once it settles in memory. Religion can resist too. A sermon that emphasizes deliverance over obedience changes how listeners understand their world. A spiritual song with layered meaning can strengthen collective feeling. A prayer meeting can double as a planning space, or at least as a place where frightened people steady one another. Faith does not always produce action directly, but it often nourishes the moral courage that action requires. The inward life matters. Oppressive systems know that, which is why they work so hard to supervise it. Some enslaved people resist by claiming limited spaces of autonomy inside the day: a private garden, a hidden coin, a market exchange, a family ritual no owner fully controls, the naming of a child, the choice to marry, promise, mourn, or celebrate according to community values. Such things may appear small beside laws and whips, yet they push back against the idea that every part of life can be owned. They say there is still a boundary here. You may violate it, but you did not create it. Violence does occur, though less often than popular imagination sometimes assumes, and usually at immense risk. There are attacks on overseers, poison scares, threats, and moments of direct confrontation. Such actions can emerge from desperation, rage, or carefully judged opportunity. But life under close surveillance makes open violence exceptionally dangerous. Historians still debate how frequent various forms of violent resistance were in daily plantation life, because records are distorted by white fear, rumour, and selective reporting. What remains beyond doubt is that resistance existed constantly, even when it did not appear in dramatic episodes. A quirky but telling form of resistance can be found in language itself, enslaved and free. Black Americans often develop ways of speaking that allow one meaning on the surface and another underneath. Humour, irony, coded phrasing, strategic politeness, and layered song lyrics all create room to communicate under pressure. A joke can conceal criticism, a compliment can hold mockery. A harmless-sounding remark can be a warning to those who know how to hear it. Oppression sharpens listening. Humour deserves more respect than it usually gets. Laughter in hard times is not denial. It is control reclaimed for a moment. To mock pretension, to tease an overseer behind his back, to tell stories about foolish masters, vain politicians, or pompous officials. These are ways of shrinking fear to a more manageable size. A person who can laugh has not surrendered the whole inner world. Even gentle sarcasm can be a small rebellion, which is wonderful news for anyone who enjoys history and suspects that pompous men have always deserved commentary. Resistance also appears in how people move. a free black community choosing to walk together to church after a public threat, a family relocating to a safer district, a group of neighbours escorting a vulnerable person across town, a fugitive choosing one road over another. Bodies in motion can form patterns of protection. The path to safety is often communal before it is individual. Mutual aid is one of the strongest quiet weapons available. Money pooled for a legal case, food shared with a newly arrived fugitive family, clothing given to someone fleeing north, a bed offered for one night, then another. These practical acts build resistance from the ground upward. Grand declarations may inspire, but somebody still needs to provide bread, blankets, and directions. Freedom travels on full stomachs more reliably than on noble phrases alone. There are also black business owners whose very existence challenges white assumptions. A successful caterer, dressmaker, barber, shopkeeper, or carpenter does more than earn a living. He or she creates economic footholds for a community and demonstrates competence that racist ideology struggles to explain away. Customers may still be prejudiced, certainly. Some people will hold both admiration and contempt in the same oddly arranged mind. But a thriving black business alters the social landscape. It provides work, information, credit, and example. Children participate in resistance too, though often in ways shaped by their age. They carry messages, memorize names, keep secrets, or simply learn to be proud where humiliation is expected. A child taught to speak clearly, read well, and regard himself as worthy becomes a long-term challenge to the whole racial order. That may sound grand, but systems of domination do think generationally. Communities resisting them must do the same. In some places, fugitives are moved through loose networks of helpers, some black, some white, some deeply known, some only briefly trusted. The routes are uncertain, improvised, and highly variable. The popular image of neat hidden lines and tidy signals misses much of the reality. Movement depends on weather, money, chance, courage, and the willingness of real households to take real risks. A basement, attic, wagon bed, hayloft, or spare room can become a passage point in a much larger human effort. The emotional texture of resistance is complex. There is fear, yes, also fatigue, also doubt. People do not become fearless merely because they are brave. The hand passing a message may tremble. The host sheltering a fugitive may sleep lightly. The speaker denouncing injustice in public may still worry about retaliation on the walk home. Courage is usually not the absence of fear. It is work performed in fear's company. As night deepens over town and countryside, acts of resistance continue in forms so small an outsider might miss them. A woman hides a paper, a boy remembers a name, a minister chooses a text with care, a carpenter keeps back a coin, a teacher lowers her voice and continues the lesson, a church committee raises funds, a sailor carries news from one port to another, a mother tells a child the truth in words the child can bear. None of these actions alone overturns the system. Together, they prevent the system from ever owning the whole soul. That is the key. In 1855, black resistance is not just the effort to escape chains, kidnappers, hostile law, or social exclusion, though it certainly includes all of that. It is also the effort to remain a thinking, loving, planning, remembering people under conditions designed to reduce life to labour and control. It is found in flight and impatience, in secrecy and in speech, in faith and in strategy, in public meetings and in whispered bedtime lessons. Power often imagines resistance only when it can see it clearly. History knows better. Much of the strongest resistance happens in the quiet, where determined people keep one another alive long enough for a different future to become possible. By 1855, the country sounds different if you listen closely. It is not only the usual creak of wagons, the ring of hammers, the murmur of markets, or the evening hymns drifting through open windows. There is another sound beneath all that. Argument, tension, a kind of national teeth grinding. Newspapers rustle with accusation. Politicians rise to speak and somehow manage to make human bondage sound like a matter of orderly debate. Ministers thunder from pulpits. Men in taverns slap tables and declare themselves guardians of civilization, which is rarely a comforting sign. Across this unsettled nation, Black Americans live inside a storm of words that may soon become much more than words. You feel it first through rumour. Someone hears that violence has broken out in a distant territory. Someone else says Congress has opened new land to slavery and conflict is spreading. A sailor brings reports from another port. A newspaper arrives folded under an arm, its print already smudged from too many anxious fingers. In a church vestibule, on a dock, in a barber shop, outside a market stall, people exchange updates in low voices. The country is talking constantly about slavery, but not in the calm, scholarly way textbooks later pretend. It is talking like a household on the verge of throwing furniture. For Black Americans, this political tension is never abstract. Every speech given by a senator, every election, every court case, every compromise announced with solemn self-congratulation. All of it presses down on daily life. A change in federal law can alter the safety of a free family in Boston. A territorial dispute far west can shape the future value of enslaved labor in Mississippi. A newspaper editorial in New York can stir action in a church basement in Philadelphia. Politics in 1855 is not a distant balcony performance. It is weather entering through the cracks. One of the major facts shaping the year is the aftershock of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, passed in 1854. That law opened those territories to the possibility of slavery based on popular sovereignty, meaning settlers would decide the question themselves. On paper, this sounded to some like a tidy democratic solution. In practice, it helped produce chaos, migration, fraud, intimidation, and bloodshed. For Black Americans reading or hearing about it in 1855, the message is grimly clear. The nation is still willing to gamble with human lives in order to preserve political balance. Freedom is discussed like a negotiable boundary line on somebody else's map. News from Kansas carries a special charge. Pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers pour in. Elections become suspect. Violence flickers and then flares. The place starts to feel symbolic even to people far away. If slavery can expand there, what future does that promise elsewhere? If conflict is already turning physical, what does that say about the strength of compromise? You do not need to stand on Kansas soil to feel the dust of it settling into ordinary conversation. It reaches kitchens, prayer meetings, schoolrooms, and dockside talk all the same. Black communities follow these developments with intense interest. A literate man reads aloud from a newspaper while others gather near, listening with tight faces. A minister comments carefully after a meeting. A teacher hears older students repeat political phrases they only partly understand. The children know enough to recognize that the adults are worried. That is often how history first appears to the young, not through full explanation, but through the altered temperature of a room. The press itself becomes part of the drama. Abolitionist newspapers denounce slavery's expansion and warn of national moral failure. Pro-slavery papers defend the institution in language so coldly confident it can make the blood cool. Mainstream papers sometimes affect neutrality while presenting deeply unequal realities as though both sides merely had strong opinions about a tariff. The newspaper page has its own smell, dry and slightly inky, and in 1855 it often carries a very uncomfortable breakfast. Black newspapers and black readers bring a different clarity to these debates. They do not have the luxury of pretending slavery is merely one issue among many. For them it is the issue that touches family, movement, labour, law, worship, and the future of every child. Articles and speeches within black public life often connect political developments directly to lived danger. What does this mean for fugitives? What does it mean for free communities? What does it mean for migration, schooling, church life, or the possibility of national change? The analysis is urgent because the stakes are so personal. There is also growing attention to political parties and shifting alliances. The old party system is cracking under the strain of sectional conflict. New coalitions form, old loyalties wobble. Men who once found comfort in compromise now find the centre harder to stand on. Black Americans watch with a complicated mix of skepticism and guarded interest. White politicians have disappointed them often enough to make trust a difficult habit. Still, when national alignments begin to shift over slavery, no sensible person ignores it. Public meetings become more charged. A lecture on anti-slavery may draw larger crowds than before. A church gathering may include longer discussion after the formal remarks end. A debating society may spend half the evening circling questions of citizenship, violence, law, and moral duty. The room grows warm with breath and argument, chairs scrape, fans move lazily in summer heat. Someone at the back asks a sharper question than expected. Someone near the front murmurs agreement. The nation is beginning to argue in earnest, and Black Americans know better than most that earnest national arguments have a habit of landing on black bodies. One fringe but fascinating detail of the time is how heavily people rely on rumour alongside print. News does not travel in one clean channel. It comes through papers, sermons, travellers, letters, steamboat talk, railroad gossip, and plain old human exaggeration. By the time a political event reaches a plantation quarter or a rural crossroads, it may arrive with embroidery added. A senator's speech becomes twice as fiery. A riot gains extra deaths. A law changes shape in retelling. Yet rumour is not simply error. It is also evidence of hunger for information. When official systems fail to protect you, you listen everywhere. That hunger is especially intense because scholars and ordinary people alike still argue in 1855 over what direction the country is really moving. Some think slavery's reach can be contained. Others believe compromise is already rotting. Some place hope in law, elections, or moral suasion. Others doubt that a system so entrenched will yield without broader upheaval. Black Americans are hardly unanimous in these judgments. Some remain hopeful about political change. Others put greater faith in self-help, migration, community defence, or divine judgment. A people living under pressure rarely have only one strategy. This uncertainty affects even the smallest details of life. A parent deciding whether to invest scarce money in a child's schooling may wonder what sort of country that child will inherit. A free family considering a move may weigh not just work and rent, but the political climate of a city or state. A minister choosing a sermon text may decide whether to speak more plainly than usual. A fugitive family may debate whether to remain in the northern states or push farther toward Canada. National tension seeps into local decision-making like rainwater under a door. Then there is the matter of public language itself. White politicians often frame the slavery debate in terms of union, property, rights, and constitutional balance. Black Americans hear the same words and notice what is missing. Families, safety, humanity, dignity, childhood, marriage, wages, prayer, bodily autonomy. It is one of the strangest features of the age that men can speak for hours about the fate of the Republic while gliding past the daily human reality at the centre of the conflict. Black communities become skilled readers of omission. They know how to hear what a man has refused to say. Churches respond in different ways. Some ministers speak boldly, tying current events to biblical themes of bondage and deliverance. Others move more cautiously, especially where open anti-slavery preaching could invite retaliation. In free black churches, political awareness often comes braided together with spiritual endurance. A prayer for the nation may not sound dramatic on its surface, yet everyone in the room understands what burdens are being named without naming them fully. A hymn can hold national grief inside personal devotion. Young people absorb the mood too. A schoolboy hears adults discuss Kansas and wonders where it is. A teenage girl helping fold newspapers sees which articles make the elders fall silent. A child playing outside notices when men on the stoop stop joking and begin speaking in clipped, serious tones. Children often sense turning points before they can explain them. The normal world keeps going, but it seems to hold its breath more often. There is also fear of backlash. As anti-slavery activism grows louder in some places, so does white hostility. A more heated national argument does not automatically make black life safer. Sometimes it makes local danger sharper. White mobs may grow more aggressive. Employers may become more suspicious. Pro-slavery zeal can intensify in response to challenge. The edge of change cuts both ways. Hope increases, so does risk. Historians still debate exactly when ordinary Americans understood that the national crisis might become irreversible. There is no single agreed moment. For some, the warning signs appeared years earlier. For others, 1855 feels like one of the years when the country's balance finally starts to wobble in a visible way. Black Americans, however, often require less convincing than white moderates. When your life has long been shaped by the core injustice at issue, you're not easily soothed by another polished promise of compromise. You can sense this in the conversations that happen after formal talk ends. The real thoughts often emerge then, in kitchens after meetings, on stoops after sundown, in workshops while tools are cleaned, in cabins when children have drifted to sleep. That is where people ask the hard questions. Will things worsen before they improve? Can the law be trusted? Is migration wiser than waiting? Are white allies dependable? How much danger is already too much danger? These are not theatrical questions. They are household questions, asked in tired voices over simple suppers, and still life continues. Clothes are washed, bread is baked, lessons are taught, rents are paid, families gather for prayer. The nation may be tightening like a rope, yet people must still prepare breakfast. That contrast gives the era its peculiar tension. Immense historical forces move through rooms where somebody is also trying to darn a sock by poor candlelight. History does not arrive with music. It arrives while daily chores are still underway. One especially telling feature of 1855 is how often black Americans are expected to wait patiently while others debate their future. Wait for elections, wait for courts, wait for public sentiment to mature, wait for moderation to prevail, wait for the Republic to discover its conscience. It is a very long line, this line of waiting, and by 1855 many have stood in it too often to admire it much longer. So communities keep preparing in their own ways. Some strengthen schools and churches, some organize vigilance efforts, some deepen ties with abolitionists, some save money for possible relocation, some watch the newspapers with sharp attention, some place faith in prayer and moral witness, others suspect sterner remedies lie ahead. None of these responses is casual. All are shaped by the feeling that the country's argument is approaching a more dangerous stage. As the year wears on, the atmosphere grows heavier, not always dramatically, but steadily. A speech stirs outrage. A report from the territories spreads alarm. A law is interpreted harshly. A preacher grows bolder. A newspaper editorials harder. A family packs quietly for a move. A committee meets later into the evening than usual. These are the small signs of a nation nearing a threshold. By lamplight, by hearth glow, by the fading light of shop windows and the last voices on the street. Black Americans in 1855 listen to the country's rising noise and measure what it may mean. They hear promises, evasions, threats, and hopes all tangled together. They know better than to trust rhetoric alone. But they also recognize movement when it begins. Something is changing, even if no one can yet say exactly how far it will go or what it will cost. The news keeps coming, the arguments keep sharpening, and beneath all the printed columns and public speeches, millions of ordinary people live with the knowledge that the nation is inching toward a reckoning it can no longer postpone much longer. Night settles differently when a whole country feels uncertain. In 1855, darkness does not simply end the day. It gathers all the unsaid things and lets them sit closer. Roads go quiet, one wagon at a time. City noise thins into scattered footsteps, a distant wheel, the bark of a dog, the last door shut for the evening. In the countryside, insects take over the soundscape with tireless confidence. Frogs call from wet ground. Wind slips along fences and through trees. Somewhere a horse shifts in a stable. Somewhere a baby turns in sleep. Somewhere a grown man lies awake longer than he admits. For Black Americans, night can be a comfort and a warning at once. It offers privacy, or a little of it. It gives families a few hours together. It softens the sharp outlines of authority, because even the powerful cannot see quite as clearly in the dark. But night also brings risk. Patrollers move. Kidnappers travel. Doors must be checked. Papers must be kept near. A sudden knock can still rearrange a life before morning, so the night is never empty. It is full of listening. If you are enslaved, the end of the day may bring the only hours that feel even partly your own. Labour has bent the back and emptied the limbs, yet there are still things to do. Clothes need mending. Food must be prepared for morning. Children need washing, settling, comforting. A cough must be tended. A pair of shoes may need one more patch to survive another week's work. The body wants sleep, but the household still asks for your hands. Even so, there is relief in being among your own people, under one roof if fortune allows, with voices that know your name without calculation. Within the cabin, firelight paints the walls in low orange. Shadows move softly over rough boards. The smell of ash, cornmeal, wool, and tired bodies fills the room. Someone hums while folding cloth. Someone else rubs sore wrists in silence. A child, still half awake, asks a question that would be amusing if it did not also break the heart a little. Adults answer gently. They do not always tell the whole truth. The whole truth is heavy for small shoulders. If you are free in a northern city, the room may be tighter packed with furniture and people, but the feelings are no simpler. The bolt is set, the curtains are drawn, a lamp burns low. Boarders trade the last of the day's news in voices meant not to carry through the wall. The room smells of starch, lamp oil, supper, damp wool drying on a chair, and the faint soot that settles over almost everything in an age of coal, candles, and wood fires. You may be free to sleep in your own bed. That is no small blessing, yet the mind still runs through practical checks. Where are the papers? Who saw you today? Did that stranger ask too much? Did the boy come home by the usual route? Freedom has its own evening rituals because danger's not agreed to keep business hours. Night is also when memory grows louder. During the day, work can keep thought narrowed to the next task. Carry this, stitch that, lift here, stir now. But at night, the mind wanders wider. It visits absent people. A husband sold years ago. A daughter living on another plantation. A son apprenticed in another town. A sister who moved north. A cousin rumoured to have reached Canada. A mother dead and still remembered through one phrase, one lullaby, one way of tying a head wrap. The dark invites recollection with stubborn regularity. History, on the large public scale, may be made in legislatures and newspapers. History, on the human scale, is made when one person refuses to forget another. Many households spend part of the evening in talk. Not grand political talk every night, though politics is never far away. More often it is practical conversation. Who needs shoes before winter? Which employer may have work next week? Whether the preacher's message was meant for a particular trouble in the community, which family is short on coal, whether so-and-so can be trusted, whether to send a child to a certain school, whether to move, whether to stay. Great questions often arrive disguised as household matters. They sit at the table beside a plain supper and wait their turn. Children listen from corners, from pallets, from the edge of sleep. Adults may think they are not paying attention. They usually are. This is how the next generation learns not only facts but tone. Which names cause silence, which topics bring caution, which memories are too painful for easy telling, which hopes are spoken carefully so as not to frighten them away. A child raised in such a room learns that the world is not always safe, but also that adults can face it together. That lesson may matter even more than the content of any single conversation. There can still be laughter at night. In fact, sometimes it arrives more freely then. A teasing remark about somebody's vanity, a story about a pompous employer with ridiculous boots, a child mispronouncing a serious word with comic confidence, a grandmother recalling a local fool whose ambition outran his good sense by several miles. Tired laughter has a special sound. It comes out low, grateful, almost surprised at itself. It does not erase hardship. It proves hardship has not swallowed everything. In some homes, music returns quietly after dark. Not the fuller communal singing of church, but a softer line hummed near the hearth, a lullaby for a child, a tune remembered from older days, a spiritual carried under the breath while someone braids hair or folds clothes. Music at night feels different. It belongs more to the room than to the wider world. It smooths the edges of fatigue. It keeps memory company. Hair braiding, mending and storytelling often sit together in the same hour. Fingers move through hair with patient firmness. A comb catches and starts again. Oil gives off a faint, pleasant scent. Fabric is turned in the hand, inspected near the lamp, threaded, stitched, folded. While hands work, voices tell stories. Some stories are moral, some are funny, some are old family recollections polished by repetition. Some may preserve fragments of a place before America, or at least the feeling of continuity that reaches back farther than written records allow. Historians still argue over how much specific African cultural memory remained distinct in various black communities by the mid-19th century. But the emotional truth is clear enough. People did not arrive in 1855 as blank pages. They carried inheritances, even when those inheritances had to travel in altered forms. Night can also bring planning. A free black committee may meet after the day's labour, because that is when working people are available. In a church basement, boarding house room, or private parlour. Men and women gather around a table with candles, papers, and worried purpose. They speak of kidnappers, legal cases, school funding, new arrivals, fugitives needing shelter, or money to be raised for a widow. The room grows warm. Wax drips, pens scratch, somebody coughs, somebody counts coins twice. Nothing about it looks dramatic in the theatrical sense. Yet this is how communities strengthen themselves against the world, quietly, after supper, by lamplight. On plantations, planning takes more dangerous forms. Who can be trusted? Whether a pass may be obtained? Which road is less watched? Whether the trader's visit means a sale is coming? Whether a family can communicate with relatives elsewhere? Whether there is any way to resist what seems to be approaching. Such conversations may be whispered under blankets, near dying coals, or outside beyond the cabin in the dark where the sound carries less clearly. Fear is present in every word, but so is intelligence. Enslaved people spend their lives reading systems, motives, and patterns. The nation often refuses to call that wisdom by its proper name, but wisdom it is. The larger country presses in even at this hour. News from Kansas, debates in Congress, speeches by white politicians who make the future sound like a problem in geometry rather than a matter of blood and kinship. Reports of captures, reports of resistance, reports of new threats and new hopes. These things travel into homes and remain there after the paper is folded. A wife asks what the article means. A husband answers, then revises the answer as he hears himself say it. A minister sitting alone with a paper may pause over one paragraph and stare at the wall for a long time. A schoolteacher may wonder what to tell her students, and what to withhold for now. The public argument of the nation becomes private weather inside the mind. One curious feature of such nights is how ordinary objects become charged with unusual importance. A Bible on a table, a folded certificate, a letter tucked into a box, a pair of shoes placed near the bed for fast use, a bundle kept partly packed, a shawl ready by the door, a little money hidden under cloth. None of these objects is grand, yet each may represent preparedness. In unstable times, preparedness itself becomes a household virtue. The law is quieter at night, but not absent. In the south, the possibility of patrols or sudden demands remains. In the north, the fear of seizure can still hang over the mind even behind a locked door. You hear wheels outside and wonder whether they will pass or stop. You hear boots on the pavement and wait to see if they continue. Sleep may come lightly at first, because listening has become a habit. A person can grow weary from danger even on the evenings when danger does not arrive. And still, in these same hours, tenderness persists. A mother pulls a blanket higher over her child's shoulder. A husband places his work-rough hand over his wife's for a moment without speaking. An elder offers a prayer that is simple and steady. A young couple, not yet worn old by the world, exchange plans that sound almost bold. A child, nearly asleep, curls around a rag doll or carved toy and breathes with perfect trust. In such moments you see the full stubbornness of black life in 1855. Not naive, not unaware, simply unwilling to surrender the human habits of love, comfort, and imagination. There is uncertainty everywhere. Yes, the nation is edging towards something. Black Americans can feel that with unusual clarity. The arguments have sharpened. The compromises look thinner. The violence in the distance no longer seems entirely distant. Nobody can say with confidence exactly what the next years will bring, only that the old arrangement is straining. But uncertainty does not erase the present. Breakfast still must be cooked. Children still must be taught. Rent still must be paid. The sick still need tending. Winter still approaches on schedule no matter what Congress decides. Perhaps that is the deepest truth of this final night view. History is approaching a turn, but people do not live inside turns alone. They live in rooms, in smells, in routines, in anxious waiting and ordinary chores, in the feel of a wooden spoon, a rough blanket, a stiff collar loosened at day's end, in the comfort of hearing a familiar voice say your name softly in a dim room. Those details are not separate from history. They are its truest texture. So across the country, black Americans in 1855 lie down at the edge of change. Some lie in cabins owned by others, some in rented city rooms, some in modest homes they have managed to build or buy through exhausting effort, some on pallets beside children, some alone, some in safety relative to others, some in danger so constant it has become almost atmospheric. Yet nearly all share this condition. They live with one ear turned toward the future and one hand still holding the present together. Outside, the stars offer no political advice. The wind does not predict elections. The trees do not explain what the nation will do. And maybe that is why the quiet of a late night matters. It asks no speeches from anyone. It simply holds all these lives at once. The exhausted field hand, the city seamstress, the dock worker, the child learning letters, the preacher, the washerwoman, the barber, the carpenter, the mother who fears a knock at the door, the father who checks the lock again, the grandmother who still knows the old song, the young man who dreams of a safer place, the young woman who wants a future larger than caution. They are all there, under the same dark sky, not powerless, not untouched by fear, not waiting idly, living, choosing, guarding, remembering, and when sleep finally comes, it does not arrive because the world has become just. It arrives because the body can carry only so much waking. Tomorrow will ask for strength again. Tomorrow will bring labour, law, worship, learning, danger, and hope in new combinations. But tonight, for a little while, the room grows quieter. Breathing steadies. Fire sinks lower. Lamps are put out one by one. The dark becomes less like a threat and more like a blanket laid gently over tired minds. Now the pace softens even more. You let the sounds drift farther away. The road is quiet now. The last wheels have passed. The last voices have thinned into the distance. Only the small night music remains, the whisper of wind, the patient insect song, the occasional settling of wood as houses and cabins rest into themselves. You feel the day loosening. The hard edges blur. The worries that press so close begin to float a little farther from the bed. You picture the lamp dimming. You picture the hearth cooling to a soft red glow. You picture a folded blanket, a worn chair, a pair of shoes waiting for morning, all across 1,855 people who carried heavy lives into the night are now giving those lives, for a few hours, to sleep. Mothers close their eyes. Children sink into dreams. Labouring hands finally unclench. Minds that watched every road and listened for every danger begin, at last, to let go. The nation remains uncertain, the future unwritten, the arguments unresolved. But sleep asks for no verdict tonight. It only asks for stillness. So you rest with these lives gently around you, with their courage, their caution, their tenderness, and their quiet endurance. The dark deepens, the room grows calmer, breath follows breath in an easy rhythm. Whatever history will demand later, it can wait outside the door for now, and little by little, under that wide and silent sky, the night carries everyone toward rest.